This is Neil King for Random Acts of Cartooning, and I'm at the Baltimore Comic-con. And as always at the Comic-Cons, I'm drawing all day long. But first... Okay, so for this episode, this is one of my favorite comics, and it's kind of a standalone. I didn't buy a lot of Captain America's when I was a kid, but I love Werewolves, and I love the Falcon, and this cover is so great. This is a John Romita Sr. cover, really beautifully done. But I just really love this Alan Lee Weiss artist, who's the artist for this one, the way that he did this. So this was done in 1973, like this is a long, long time ago. And it's like a standalone werewolf movie. And I just think the way that they handled it, it's like you see the first scene where all these werewolves kill Captain America. Right? All these kind of strange looking werewolves. And just this beautiful figure work that's being done here, as you can see. And I just love all these little things. Like, look at those motorcycles. They're just it's such an amazing kind of a simplistic way of doing them, and they just read so well. It feels like it's, the 70s. But anyway, I find out that it's not the actual Captain America, and these werewolves, I guess, are being trained to kill Captain America, who of course is going to be showing up eventually. But I really love the technique, and it's just all figure work. I like how they're doing even all these kind of color concepts. But I think about this episode all the time. Just beautiful figure work, like this female character. It feels like he's just kind of showing off. And then Falcon becomes, of course, a werewolf. And the good thing about these kind of stories is that they're really self-contained. I mean, this is a quick little thing that's going on, and you get this great feeling of the figures and how they work together. And then Yellow Claw shows up, of course. They're just beautifully done. Weiss has done a lot of things. I don't have a lot of his work, but like just that figure alone and how they're intermingling together, really just beautiful. So as a kid, I loved it, of course, because of the werewolves. Nick Fury's there too. Why not? But I love the way that they handled it. And it's all just, it brings you through the story really nicely. It's not a typical comic style. So I don't know how much work he did. He probably did a lot of work, but this is not what you usually think of. Like even the way the Captain America looks. It's not typical comic book style. And maybe that's why I'm drawn to it. But it's a really great book. And it's just one of those kind of things that when you're a kid, you just remember it a lot. But this Romita cover always, I think about it all the time. Pick it up if you can. All right, so this is a typical booth that I would have at the Comic-Cons. And when I look at it, I just want to make sure that people are seeing all my stuff out in front of them. I have my two portfolios out. This is my sketch list. But the thing I try to do in front of people, as much as I can, is to make sure that I'm drawing in front of them, because they don't get a chance to see many people do something like that. They tend to just see finished works, and what I usually notice is it's a crazy thing that there aren't that many people who are doing what I'm doing every time when I'm here at a specific con. So this is a commission, and I had to do 3 separate characters, and they're all kind of monster characters. So the first one is a Lady Morbius, and Morbius is one of my favorite characters to draw. But this is a female version of that. So as you can see, I'm just kind of laying in quickly all my shapes. And I'm trying to get those proportions down. Sometimes, especially if it's a female form, I may go back in and fix it up. Sometimes I elongate them too much, or it all depends on the angle and all that stuff. So, but this one's kind of not moving around that much, so I do like to kind of get a sweeping feeling about everything. So I tend to elongate figures a lot, and when I'm doing sketches, especially if it's a full figure, I just want to have some kind of, even if they're standing in one position, that there's something going on, and whether that's a gestural hand, or that something's going on in the background, or if they are intermingling with someone, that's what I usually will do. So I'm just going in with this with my pen, and the idea with this is all the super detail I do with this specific pen, and I really have grown to really love this pen. This kind of, you push down in the ink. It's a waterproof ink, and I use it a lot. And if you've watched the channel, you can see how I use it. But especially for female faces and any kind of detail that I want to get done, I don't go to the thicker brushes right away. I tend to, just try to get my detail in there pretty fast, and just get the gestural parts. And again, like I'll recognize pretty quickly what has to be done with the finish. So I'm going in now with my next size pen, and as you can see, it's a brush sign pen, and I do really like this one. This is a brand new one too, out of that I had just opened up. So it's nice and crisp. And it's not like I'm a big lover of markers, but this marker is pretty good. So it gives me that next level of line. Not so much as my brush that I use all the time, but it's definitely a bolder line than I would have had with the pen. So you can see, like, even though I have pencil lines down there, I just kind of use them, and I feel out if I feel like things are just a little too stylized, and I'll bring them in a little bit. But with figures like this, I just want to make sure that when I'm doing it, and I'll tell you, it can happen so quickly, is that you just lose the proportion, and you're not sure where she should have, or is she too long, or is she too short? Like that's the kind of thing that can happen pretty quickly. But I'm so used to drawing figures that I usually just go for it, and it just has to be kind of dynamic. And her other hand, just gestural. She has these kind of little wings. You've probably seen the Morbius character before. Now with her, I just have her with bare feet. I think Morbius, I don't know what kind of thing he has. He might be barefoot. I don't know. Or that it's all just one piece. You don't see the flesh down below. I think that's how it works. There's no boots or anything. So now I'm going in with my my brush pen, which is, to me, the way that I like to work the most. And I get my feeling of how much I can do to put in the contrasty darks and heavier lines into all the figures that I tend to do. So for her, the costume is kind of a really dark costume. It has just some brighter areas of black, and then what they do for the comics is they'll make the other parts, like on the legs and everything, that'll be kind of a blue, but with a lot of shadows. But I don't, it's just supposed to be black. You're supposed to think of it as black, not that it's blue. And that's strange, but that's a comic book thing. And they'll do the same thing with the hair, that instead of making it just black or grays, they make it blue. So like Spider-Man costumes like that, it's supposed to really be black. It's not supposed to be like a blue part. So I just have my semi-moist Prang watercolors that I bring to every convention. and I had erased all the pencil lines off, and I get started. So with a wash at the beginning, you just want to make sure that you are getting enough little pigment on there. And she doesn't have kind of like the cartoon flesh that some of the characters will have. She has, it's really kind of white skin, at least Morbius does. So I'm going in there, and I know I'm looking at her kind of as if she's a monochromatic figure. So instead of putting the blue on the figure where her arms are and her torso and her legs, I'm going to put down for the first layer, I'm going to make it red. So a warm color. And still keep going in with that light value of the red for the skin. And then I'm just going to go kind of in there and just build it. Because I know I'm going to go on top of it with a darker black on top. It'll be watered down. But to me, this kind of builds like the whole character being warm. Now, I will add blues sometimes to the characters. That if people are so used to seeing them with the blue, like blue hair, that's supposed to mean that's black. But I like the warmer part, and when you see them like that, I just think it's a better mood. It feels a little bit nicer. So I'm trying to go a little deeper on the red, even though I know with a character like this, you don't want to have that fire engine red, like on this. You want to have something that's just red enough that you're reading it as that. So again, I'm just making my way quickly. I've sped up the video for this part. Now I always like to put some kind of atmospheric background with sketches that I do. So I always, or almost always, I'll put the complementary color in the back. So I'll put that green back there in back of the red, knowing again that I'm going to go probably on top of that with some black. I'll put some of that green inside the reds. That's the way you usually would put any kind of darkness. If you weren't using black, use that complement to get some of the shading in there. So again, here I am, and now I'm kind of getting really aggressive with this. And this is how I think you kind of, in a sketch, like the way I like to see them, is a little bit of this kind of burst color. Still feel that green back down there. And, as you can see, I'm just going right in and going right on top of that red. So to me, it reads more like it's a gray, but because of the red on the bottom, it really reads, I think, a little bit better than making it blue. So she has a kind of an otherworldly feeling here. And again, I'm just thinking of this kind of haze behind her, and that a dry brush feel that I really prefer for a lot of the finishes that I have. Like dry brush is like, to me, like a great thing with when you're doing pen and ink or brush and ink. So I do it a lot just to get that texture so it's not too crisp, everything that I'm doing. And just kind of, that's her. That's the first one. So the next one I had to do for this specific one is Swamp Thing. Now, I don't love the way Swamp Thing tends to be drawn. I like Man Thing more. I don't know why, but I was looking up some Swamp Things, and because Bernie Wrightson had done Swamp Thing, and he did an unbelievable job. He was with Alan Moore. So he had one image that I saw that I really liked, though. So it was really more grotesque. And he was coming out of a swamp or something. So this is totally me trying to do that idea. Like, have this kind of character. Like, I don't know whether he reminds me a little bit more a Frankenstein because of it. But what I wanted to do is, make him look even scarier looking than some of the stuff that I usually see with Swamp Thing. There's just something, he's supposed to be scary, So to me, that he's much more of a monster here. Now, all you have to do to make sure that he looks like Swamp Thing, or at least somebody might recognize him as Swamp Thing, is that the nose area, it's kind of this flap that they have over that nose area, and that he's kind of green. He's got vines all over him and all that stuff. So to me, I try to keep it super loose. And again, it's a very kind of, I don't know, it reminds me a little more of like a Neil Adams, and where he elongates sometimes. So I will always, and Sienkiewicz, obviously, but they're all he's kind of an Adams guy, but really went in his own direction. Love his work. But when I'm doing things like this, it just kind of reminds me, my version of Neil Adams. And the only way that this works is when you go in there and aggressively work with the shadow. So all of this is just all of the detail. But once I kind of go in with the brush with this part, that's is when it becomes more Wrightson looking. And Wrightson, when he did these types of pieces, it just seemed like it's like this thing about the figure. It's kind of like a cadaver or something. It reminds me just of this dead body. And so I'm just going in and just catching the feeling of this. I'm just trying to go around, give a little bit of texture, get this, a little bit of shapes in there, all the mark making to try to make it seem like it's a human body, but it's really distorted, and it's supposed to be kind of scary looking. And I think with this, you get a better sense of it when Wrightson did it like this. So this is kind of the way I think I'm going to draw Swamp Thing from now on. Not try to do the one that I see that's a little bit less scary. I like this one where he's just like, if you can imagine this coming out of the swamp, you're just like that. It's a scary looking figure. So the brush really helps, and you can see I'm just trying to catch some really nice, balance there. I really just like using the brush like this, and I know I'm going to go in with color, so I'm even going to make them darker. So when you see them like this, you realize that's gonna come on. So the next part here is I'm just throwing some. I cleaned up the lines off of it, and right away you can kind of see him now more as Swamp Thing. Before it could have easily been Frankenstein if you weren't really looking at it, but now I think it reads more when you put a little color on him. So he's almost all green. He's coming out of the swamp. So I'm just kind of laying that down, and for convention sketches that I try not to spend much more than 15 to 20, 25 minutes tops on a sketch, because I charge very little when I'm doing sketches, and I don't want to overdo it, because believe me, I'm kind of giving them away when I'm doing this stuff. So I'm enjoying it, which is the key to doing sketches. But for me, I can't look at this as a finished piece. To me, it's a finished sketch, of course, but it's still a sketch. And I think the magic of it happens because I'm on a deadline, and I have a whole bunch of people who are coming up and saying, "Oh, could you do this sketch for me or that sketch?" And I'm like, "Yes, I can. I'm here for a certain amount of hours." And this is the Baltimore Comic-con, so that's a 3-day event. So I'm there, and I'm just drawing from when I sit down to when I leave. So any of these kinds of things, I could, have a big list of something to draw. And it's just great to do it. But you have to be realistic and not get lost in something that it's not going to be. So typically, as you can see, I'm going to use the red as a background for this one because he's all green. And I'm just adding some of that red to that green, give it variety. I think it's I feel like I got some nice dry brush strokes back there. And again, I'm just going right on top of it. I want to get that dry brush, that beautiful feeling of texture. And I don't want to do too much. So I'm just keeping that up there around his head and the torso. And then I'm going to go on top of him with some more grays, allow some of the areas to stay light. But a lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now, it's just to get the contrast. Now remember, this is a kind of a trilogy piece because this specific patron wanted 3 different types of characters. And they're all kind of monsters in their own way. Swamp Thing's kind of a good guy, but he's also a monster, let's face it. So again, I have this sped up so I don't paint this quickly. So it's, I'm just going in there. There's not much more to do. Now it's just me saying, is he popping out enough? Is there enough contrast? Because if I keep going too far, I'll lose him and he'll be gone. So you want to have this feeling of that he's just kind of just close enough as a sketch that you really get it. Not too much light, not too much dark. Does he still read? And a lot of times at the very end, I'll touch up the line to make it burst a little bit more because I can see the lines need a little bit of that. But this is kind of the finish. There he is. Swamp Thing. All right, so this is Man Wolf. And this was a 70s kind of a character. Again, Marvel was doing a lot of horror things. You were allowed to do it, and it was pretty big in the 70s because of the reruns of all the monster movies. And it was, so anything with werewolves or vampires or that stuff that they would do. So this was a Spider-Man character. And I think this was J. Jonah Jameson's son was Man Wolf. And I thought, it's a pretty good character. So I'm trying to find the place that I want with him, the way I picture him. So, it was kind of very wolf-like head, trying to keep it, scary, and he's like looking at us. And not too typical. I don't think he's going to be very brown. I think he's kind of gray. So with this, I'm just trying to get the lines, get all my detail in there. I'm going to have the hair come back a little bit further. I do like, werewolves, a good thing about them, but they can all be so different looking. He's got more of a true wolf head than some werewolves that you might draw. And again, I'm speeding this up. So I'm still doing lots of little detail, like that hair kind of pulling back all the way back, And there's a lot of little stuff to do, with characters like this. But when I'm drawing like this, I really, again, have in mind, like, what's my deadline with this? What am I trying to do with this character? And then I just go after it. I can adapt all those hands and the fingers and, all those knuckles and all that kind of stuff, like, to me, to make a good hand. And then the hand that's receded back in space like this. Way more
in shadow to make it seem like it goes back. So the character didn't have much of a costume, but it was kind of, like a yellow costume. And so I'm going right after it with my brush. And for characters like this, it really makes sense to do it like this because he really pops out. He's just all out there. And again, he's got that hand towards us in the foreground, trying to make a nice dynamic pose. I'll change things so many times, like that leg progressing in front, and then the leg behind. You can get rid of a lot of that. But the beauty of sketches like this is that, you're just trying something. Does it feel right? Does it read like the character? It doesn't have to be exactly them. And I was showing earlier, like to me, this is kind of a very Romita kind of character from the 70s. He may have designed that costume. But to read it, you have to remember that as soon as I put that yellow costume on, I mean, people who know the character, like they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's Man-Wolf. And I don't know how long this character was around, but he's perfectly fine. And, that's the thing about comics when you're a kid. Like, this is everything you wanted. Nowadays I think the comics, I feel like the reason why kids don't read them as much is I think they are too adult. And back then, you just wanted to see these wacky characters, and they come in, and there's some good fights, and, very dramatic stuff, and then you liked it, and I think that sometimes now that they're just not made for kids anymore, and the group of people who grew up on them in the 60s and the 70s wanted to keep them themselves, so characters like this are not going to be as much around now as back then. They needed a lot of villains. They need a new villain every episode, so why not, right? And you have some of your main characters that become something. So I am putting a little brown down on the bottom, just a little. He's not a brown wolf, but I think it's nice to kind of have that warmth down there. And I put a little red in. So again, you think of wolves, I think of way more of the red and brown, But for me, for this one, I do have to remember that he really is kind of gray. The ones at least I've seen of him. But for this, I want to put those colors on the bottom, knowing that the gray is going to go right on top and get rid of them. But you'll feel, you'll recognize that there's a warmth to that figure. And again, I think for sketches, it's really effective. So now in the background, I'm putting this kind of, this violet color to contrast the yellow, putting a little of that in him. And I think it always works. You use those complements. I mean, that's really what comics are about. They use the complementary colors so much. Again, trying to get a little bit of a... as dark comes in, it's all about the dry brush. I've beaten this brush up for so long, but I have new brushes, but sometimes these older ones, you're like, I don't want to give this up. I know the effect that it can give me. So I want to see little touches of that yellow, but it doesn't matter to have it too much. I think that it reads without having that, big bright yellow on him that they would have in the comic book. For a sketch, I think it's way more interesting to see how somebody, sees the character, and that they're not just trying to make it exactly like the one that's in the comic book. So again, this is sped up. just getting in their contrasts. Sometimes, you see it in your head and how it's supposed to be, and then you're constantly just touching these things up. And at some point, when you're doing sketches for people, you got to let it go. You just got to go as far as you can and then let it go. And that's really what I'm hoping that I'm letting go at the right place with a lot of these sketches. Should I have gone further, or should I have not gone so far? And it's a big question whenever you're doing any of these kind of things. But as you can see in the background, I just want him to pop out a little bit. It's all manipulating that. It gives it a sense of atmosphere, but it's not like a background that, sometimes I'll put a cityscape behind them or some type of rock formation, or, it's coming out of something. But for this one, just total atmosphere. Give him a little bit of a shadow on his feet onto the surface, and he's basically there. So this is a great fun to do, this little trilogy of monsters, Man-Wolf. And thanks for viewing. So here are the finishes. And remember, I do commissions all the time. Just contact me. And thanks for watching again.